Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this evening's meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Board. I'm Councillor Kate Salmon, and I'm the chair of this board. I will first ask the Democratic Services Officer to read out the housekeeping notice, please.
Thank you. Please note that this meeting is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. The meeting may also be recorded or streamed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public. For those in the room, please note that if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the assembly point in the car park at the front of the building. Finally, please could everybody ensure that background noise is kept to a minimum and that mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to a silent setting for the duration of the meeting. For those in the room, this includes turning off microphones and turning the volume down completely on laptops. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So item 1 on the agenda is apologies, and I believe we have had apologies tonight from Councillor Rice and Councillor Walters. And we have sorry, that's me jumping ahead. And we have Councillor Aikenhead joining us online tonight. Jumping on to item 2, substitute members. I believe we have just one substitute member, which is Councillor Tarling, joining us this evening. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
So item 3 is declarations of interest. Do any councillors have any disclosable pecuniary interests or any other interests on any items on the agenda that they wish to raise? Councillor Goodall.
Just items 10 and 11. I'm a season ticket holder at Bournemouth, but no pecuniary interest.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other declarations? No, I'm not seeing anyone indicating thank you. We move on then to the confirmation of the minutes of the meeting that was held on the 20th of October. Can I just see if there's any dissent from approving those minutes as a correct record? I am not seeing any, so we'll take that as confirmed. Thank you. Item 5 is information considered between meetings, which we have the Q1 corporate performance report. This item is included to ensure that there's a record and is for the board to note. So I don't think there's anything that needs to be said on this. I would just remind members that the corporate performance report is there, and it's quite a useful place to go and have a look and see just a quick snapshot of things that have been going on, how things are moving along in terms of our key performance indicators and so on, and therefore somewhere to go to look for items we might want to be looking at in scrutiny. So I recommend everybody do that from time to time. Item 6 is the recommendation tracker, which is an item included for information, but if anyone does have any comments or queries on that, then I will take those now. Does anyone have anything they wish to raise on the recommendation tracker? I noted that in terms of outstanding issues, there is one around blue badges, but since we have that on our agenda tonight, I'm going to park it and raise it during that item. The other 2 outstanding have a deadline, which is in the future, so we'll have to give Cabinet a bit longer to get back to us on those ones. Moving on then to, bear with me, item 7. Item 7 is recommendations from portfolio holders, Cabinet or Council. I suggest, we do have some recommendations to consider, but I'm going to suggest that we actually take these at the end of the meeting along with the work plan, because they potentially feed into our work plan, so it makes more sense to take those 2 things together. Does that sound okay to everybody if we take that approach? Nobody's indicating otherwise, so that's good. Thank you. And then we move on to item 8, which is public issues, and I don't believe we have had any. Is that correct? We have no public issues for this meeting. So moving on once again to item 9. I have been asked if we can reorder the next 2 items, because one of the officers who's going to come and speak to us about item 9 hasn't been able to get here due to, I think there's an accident somewhere and there's some bad traffic. So we're actually going to move to item 10 and then on to item 11. So item 11 is the Vitality Stadium draft heads of terms. And Councillor Mike Cox is going to introduce that item for us briefly to start with. And then we are going to move to the exclusion of press and public, consideration of the exclusion of press and public. So Councillor Cox, may I ask you to briefly introduce the Vitality Stadium item?
Certainly, Chair. Effectively, this is in relation to providing 2 leases to AFC Bournemouth in respect of the stadium and a car park, so that they can develop what they want, the way they want to go. But I am going to introduce Gwilym, who's the officer responsible, for him to go through the details with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. So before we go any further with this item, I need the board to consider the following resolution, which is that under section 100A4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the meeting for the following item of business, on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 in part I of Schedule 12A of the Act, and that the public interest in withholding the information outweighs such interest in disclosing the information. Can I see if there's consensus for us to go into exempt session on this item? I'm not seeing any dissent, so therefore we will pause the live stream and go into closed session for the next item.
We should be right.
So we are back now on the live stream for this meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Board. And we are moving on to, or backwards in the agenda to item 9, which is the blue badge update. We reordered the agenda slightly to accommodate officers who were having trouble getting here through bad traffic, as I understand it. This is an update on the blue badge service, which has been brought forward from the schedule. We had it scheduled to come back to us in the spring next year, but it's been brought forward at the request of a councillor who's not a member of the board, having it come to their attention that there was some changes in the service performance. I'd like to invite Councillor Martin, the portfolio holder for customer communication and culture, to introduce the report to start with, if I may.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Colleagues will be aware that on the 15th of September, I circulated an email to all members of the council about slippage in the blue badge system. So I think when you said that members had become aware, I think it was because I had emailed out proactively rather than letting it come out some other way.
Indeed, of course.
So I sent the email within about 48 hours of being made aware that we had indeed slipped back significantly from the progress the team had made earlier in the year. This was, of course, disappointing and resulted in a very immediate meeting with officers, including Linda and Matty, to discuss how we'd got to this situation and how we could fix the problems. In the email, I outlined a series of measures that were being taken to address the problem, and indeed many of these have been put in place by our head of customer services, Linda, who, as you know, has also been working on the library strategy, as we were here not long ago on that. I think it's fair to say that it's become apparent, or more than apparent actually, and I think accepted by everyone, that there are underlying inefficiencies in the system that we have currently operating, and that there needs to be a complete overhaul for this system to be sustainable for the long term, and not just a quick fix when things slip. And obviously, we were in a good position. I can't remember where we were in March, April, May, and obviously it was, as I've already said, a disappointment to find that we were not where we wanted to be 9 weeks ago. I think it was 9 weeks ago. So I know Linda will talk you through the detail of where we are now, and I think and I think actually the figures are quite encouraging. Linda has been providing me with figures every Monday, and I have been seeing the performance and the things that she's been putting in place. Working through, and I think she'll also talk to you about what this re-engineering of the blue badge system, blue badge process will look like. Those are the elements to that. So I think you will also hopefully find that encouraging as well. I don't know where to deal with this now, but I have been having conversations with the senior transport advisor at the local government association. And also a gentleman who is the political advisor for the Liberal Democrat group at the LGA. That's obviously on the basis that the Christchurch Independents don't have a political advisor at the LGA, but there we go. But can I just finally say, before I hand over to Linda, from a political accountability perspective, I'd like to take this opportunity to apologise to all our residents who've been waiting an unacceptably long time to have their blue badge renewals. And I'm hoping, I'm confident they already are seeing a difference, but that there is a long-term solution. And as I've said on more than one occasion, I am more than aware from the cases that I have personally dealt with and from the cases that have been passed to me by members of the council and indeed representations by individuals directly, that I understand the distress and the difficulty this has caused. Again, I know I said this, but I'm confident we are on the right track. So on that note, I would like to pass over to Linda and Matty to pick up the detail of that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Martin. And yes, I should have said at the beginning, but I'll say now that we have here Linda Anderson, who is our Head of Customer and Libraries, and Matty Rowdsep, the Director for Customer and Property. And I think Linda is going to continue the presentation at this point.
Thank you, Chair. So as Councillor Martin has set out, we are not in a good position at the moment, but we are in an improving position. Our processing times are coming down week on week. I think the only time it kind of stayed the same was over half term, when understandably we had staff off on leave, and it shows the resilience issues we have in the team, really. So currently, obviously in September, we had 600 people waiting longer than 12 weeks. That's now down to 239 people. And we had 2,000 people waiting up to 12 weeks, and it's now down to 1,599. Still not where we need to be, but it is coming down week on week. I came into the process fresh in September and started looking at it from an end-to-end perspective. And it's fair to say that there's lots of systems involved, lots of stakeholders involved, and ultimately in each area of it, it's not a modern process, it's not efficient. So we are looking at how we can improve that alongside trying to bring the figures down for those residents that are waiting. 65% of applications come in without the right level of evidence, so we've tried to improve the information on the website for people to look at. Not everybody obviously looks at that because their application goes into a government portal, and that government portal, because it's a generic portal for all councils, isn't specific to the evidence that we need in BCP. So longer term, what we're looking at doing is bringing that application process into the council. So we encourage people to come in to us directly rather than through a third party. And then we'll be able to process those applications through our new CRM management system, and be able to queue those applications more efficiently for officers then to assess them and process them. We believe that through that process, we'll be able to put better guidance in place. So as people are filling in the application form, it will have guidance within that to tell them what they need to do at each stage. And then hopefully at the point of submission, they have a checklist they can go back and they can check that they've uploaded everything they need to upload at that point in time. About 95% of our applications come in digitally already. So we think that's a really good way of trying to get people on board. I don't think people deliberately send in their forms without the required information. I think they're just confused about what they need to provide, and certainly those applications that require a deal of assessment because of different health scenarios, it's quite a complex picture and quite hard to describe. So we're doing those things. At the minute we have documented the process as it is. We've documented the process as we want it to be, and we've had an internal meeting with our IT colleagues to work out how we make that get onto our CRM system. So it's with a team currently who are working up the front end of that, the customer end of it, what they will need to complete. And then hopefully at the end of this month, it will pass to our development team who can add in all the technical functionality behind it. So that we can have all those processes in place that will present us with dashboards and information and easier ways for the assessing officer to get their hands on information. At the minute, when people upload their application to the government portal, they have one chance to upload their documents. And if they don't upload the documents in that go, their only option then is to email them into us. So currently we have an email inbox full of emails, probably 200-300 a week coming in, of documents, which we then have to take out of that box and match it with the application, which is clearly not a modern way or an efficient way of handling those documents. So we'll work through all of those. Anything else I haven't mentioned? We did say last time we were here in May that we would add a not for reassessment flag onto the system. We have done that. Obviously it will take us 3 years because most applicants apply every 3 years for us to realise the benefit of that, but hopefully down the line, when somebody who has a long-standing condition that isn't going to get better, we can pass those through more quickly on a reapplication than we have done up until now. I think I would just say that there are lots of elements that we can improve within the process. Some of them we'll be able to realise relatively quickly, getting the application form up and running and bringing it into our council systems. There will be other aspects that will be on kind of a wish list for things that we'd like to do given the technical development that we need to do. And then that will cover off a lot of processes in the council, not just the blue badge process. I'll pause there for questions, I think.
Yeah, thank you, Linda. That's really helpful. Councillor Debnam.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'm interested, although it sounds a nightmare system, I must say, thank goodness I don't need a blue badge at the moment. It seems a terrible system to have to go through when you're talking about form filling, which is always the case. But my main concern with what you've said here hasn't really come out in what you've been saying, which is that you seem to be terribly short-staffed. If we had all these applications and loads of staff, it wouldn't be quite so bad, would it? So surely what we need to do is have more staff. So would that not be one of the answers? I mean, you've got down here something like that. You've got 2.5 staff, or not quite that bad. You did mention teams of this and teams of that. But my concern, Chairman, and I think I've said this in other versions of this thing, we are cutting radically staffing because of the state of finances. But this is a service that people notice, and Councillor Martin has said that we need to do better, and we can't do better if we keep cutting and then we have no staff. So I'd like a sort of take on that, if you wouldn't mind.
Chair?
Go ahead.
Yeah, in an ideal world, it would be great to have more staff, wouldn't it? But we're not in that world. We are under pressure to make savings year on year. We have made savings year on year in the customer contact centre. I think 3 years on the run, we've given savings up, and there is an element of robbing Peter to pay Paul, and I think that's why we're back here repeatedly, because we keep borrowing staff from other places and bringing them in, making it better, and then they go back. That's not sustainable. I think what I'm focused on is the sustainable way of solving it, and I think that I can see enough inefficiency in the process that I think we need to grab that and we need to do that. If we still at the end of that think that we haven't got enough staff, then we can look at that at that point. But at the minute, I think we're just utilising other people within the team to get the numbers down, and hope that the efficiencies we can drive will sort out the problem.
Thank you. Councillor Martin indicated you wanted to come in as well.
I just wanted to echo what Linda said about, we're obviously relentlessly under pressure to make cuts. We still have, I'm not sure exactly how much it is as of today, but we still have millions of pounds to find to balance the budget next year. Customer service always comes under pressure. I think in the first year that it came under me, we made £100,000. We took £100,000 out, Matthew, was that right? And I can't remember in the current financial year, but so that's a lot. That's four. I think 100 grand is probably 4 or 5 members of staff. So while I completely appreciate what Councillor Dedman says, and I don't disagree with her, we find ourselves year on year in a dire financial situation for all the reasons that everybody knows, and that clearly has an impact. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Trent.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, this is something that's obviously been of concern, and I've witnessed the ups and downs, and it was like deja vu a couple of months ago that suddenly we started looking at long waits that we were looking at a year or so ago, and then it improved. And I thought, and I get the explanation that the using staff from other departments and bringing them over to make up numbers, that has helped, but it's not a permanent solution. I know that amongst the recent people that have raised this was actually one of my former ward colleagues who needs a blue badge, and he was frustrated, and he confirmed what someone said at our last surgery, which was after 12 weeks they were said, oh, that information you've given us isn't adequate. It has to come from a consultant and things like that. And that was someone who was on a long-term, never going to get better type of situation. So yeah, I'm kind of glad to hear that it's being sort of looked at and addressed, but I would like to see it sort of work a bit more efficiently and be sustainable. The one thing I want to ask about actually is that in the past there's been a reference that the Department of Work and Pensions gets involved and has to kind of have a look at it, or you know, I probably got this wrong, but I thought it had to go to the DWP for some element of the process. And have I got that wrong, or is that the case? And if it is the case, what on earth do they want it for when it's being processed within BCP? Surely BCP is, you know, a responsible authority. Why does it need to get bounced over to the DWP? So I'd appreciate some kind of explanation of that, because I can't explain it to people properly that there is this seemingly extra process. But I think at the end of the day, I'm just concerned to see it go down. If it gets back to the marvellous levels of 7 or 8 weeks, which it was at one time earlier this year, great. But even if it just settles 10 weeks or something within the 12-week target, that would be better than nothing, and then people know where they are. But yeah, I just really want to know what on earth kind of involves a DWP in all of this.
Thank you, Councillor Trent. Linda, are you able to help with that?
I can. So we get applications from different cohorts, essentially. So there might be organisations applying for blue badges because they might be transporting people with disabilities, etc. You have an application route to do with people that are claiming PIP or DLA. You have your fresh, brand new applications, and you have your renewals. And those people that apply because they're in or happen to be in receipt of PIP or DLA, there are certain parts of that that make you eligible for a blue badge, not all of it. So we have the facility to check a system for those eligibility bits of information, and then we can authorise the badge through. We don't physically send it off to the DWP. We have access to a system that can tell us whether they qualify. And if they qualify, they can be passed through without the burden of evidence that other applications might require. So currently, as at today, we're processing PIP and DLA cases within a week because it's that much more easy to do. The reapplications are taking 11 weeks and 3 days, and the new applications are taking 13 weeks and 3 days. So they've come down from where they were. They're not quite, well, the reapplications are just below the 12 weeks, which is good because that's the target time the Department for Transport give us. New applications are just now slightly above. So we're coming down, but I hope that explains the PIP DLA part.
Yeah, thanks for that. And hopefully, when I get the second-hand information, the most recent person was saying they were told 14 to 16 weeks. So I'm rather hoping that they are a lot closer to being sorted out than that. But I do think that, particularly in the case of renewing existing blue badges, that's an area where, particularly with people with a long-term condition, where there is a chance of speeding things up. Obviously, new applications have to go through checks and balances and so on. But yeah, so I'm hoping it's going to get better because I don't really want to be in another deja vu state next summer.
Thank you. Councillor Canavan.
It's just following on from Councillor Trance's point, actually. So in paragraphs 13 and 14, it talks about the flag that you've introduced on those cases that do not need or will not need reassessment, and this 3-year period and so on. That 127 cases feels instinctively low to me, given that the majority of these people that are applying for them, I suspect, are what Councillor Trent has just referred to, in that they've got long-term care issues. which will last significantly longer than 3 years. So I'm just wondering, within all of that mechanism, whether there is a way of streamlining the process in terms of that need to reassessment, because if we could get that figure up from 127, I might have got this wrong, but that feels to me as though that would make the system a bit easier.
I think the number will go up. I think we've just done it for a short period. By the time we've got it, I mean, we were here in May, and we've put it in since. So I think it's just the number of applications that have gone through that hit that criteria so far. So I think it will go up. There's always that fine line between meeting the requirements of the auditors for fraud, for Blue Badge, and then making sure the applications that they're going through are legitimate. But agreed, it is a way that if we don't need to look at an application twice because we know that circumstance isn't going to change, then it's really not worth doing that, is it? So yeah, we'll be able to report on those numbers as we get further into the process and the redesign, hopefully. The redesign we're hoping for March, April time.
Thank you. Councillor Aikenhead has her hand raised online, so we're going to go to her next.
Yes, hello. So I've got two questions. So I'll ask you them both. Well, the first one is, I think I heard you mention that when people fill in their information on the sort of central system, we don't always get the information we need because there's information we need that's specific to BCP. So I was just wondering why we need information that other places don't need, and if that's what you meant. So that was one question. My other question was about the future going forward. I really like the idea of what you're doing, looking at the process and making it more efficient, and that's great, and that should really help with the times. But I'm a bit concerned about the fact that it appears that with blue badges there are peaks and troughs, and that's a natural thing that we're always going to get, and also that it's always going to be a fairly small team, and it could be even smaller if you make it more efficient. And that means there's still going to be that risk to resource if somebody's off. And I understand that it's not sustainable to borrow staff in a disorganized way just when there's an emergency on. But that's not quite the same as actually training some people up so that you can actually have flexible resource in the team. And I just wondered whether you had considered the idea of once it's a little bit more computerized, the fact that people outside of the team could perhaps do some of the work, and that would perhaps reduce the risk rather than just making it more efficient, because I think the risk may still possibly be there. So I just really wondered if you considered that and what you thought about it.
Thank you. Linda, are you able to respond?
Yeah, so the bit about the generic portal of the government and then everyone needing different requirements, I think it's that the guidance is the guidance and the interpretation of that guidance differs across councils. And what we need to do is understand what those core documents are so that we can be telling people what they are. Now, the government don't do that on their portal because they know every local authority, there's differences across them. So there just isn't that opportunity to do it. We have, as I said, put more information on our own website to give people an idea of the types of documents that they might provide for their given scenario. But it is like a matrix of information because they might be seeing a different healthcare provider. The one might be seeing a GP, one might be a specialist consultant, and they'll have access to different pieces of documents that can help to evidence what they're describing in their application. So we do need to get to a point where we can offer the most helpful advice that people get it right the first time when they're sending it in, and I acknowledge that. So hopefully that's why there's a difference. It's not, and I think we also need to discuss it with our auditors as we are developing it, that they're happy that what we're asking for hits those buttons for that fraud versus flexibility argument. So we have got eyes on that. The second part, forgotten what it was.
Utilising staff.
Oh yes, utilising stuff. We've got that documented on our mapping that we've been doing. I think it's always a constant kind of challenge because the customer service advisors already touch an awful lot of services and they can't be experts on all of those services. And so we did an exercise last year because we've obviously had the budget reduce over the years. Those people are doing more and more all the time. And trying to, Blue Badge is one of our services that requires the most amount of training for the assessment part of that process. So we've got it mapped within the work we do. We don't only do the technology changes that I've talked to you about, but we're looking at the whole model of that service as well. And at the minute we have lots of chunks of work with different people working on them, but with some people only being able to do one bit of it. So whilst we've been doing this work over the last 7-10 weeks, we've also been training some of the staff to do a bit more, so that it can touch and make a difference in more areas.
Thank you. That sounds like you're doing a brilliant job, and I shall look forward to it being making a really big difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reaganhead. Councillor Trent, you wanted to come back in?
Yeah, I just want to go back to this consultant thing because it appears that that is at the discretion of BCP. It's one of the extras, so that they make an application through the DWP or whoever. But when it comes to renewing an existing blue badge with an existing condition that isn't getting any better, why is it necessary to have a consultant involved? And why not? Isn't it just the GP that is required in this? I can understand it if it was a new application. There might be some more information needed if it's starting or if it's a temporary condition. But in the case of a renewal of something which has been, given out for the last however long, why is the requirement for the consultant come in? Because that does confuse me a little bit, because it seems to be making delay sort of.
So I'm hearing a couple of different things there. One is the renewal process and somebody that has a longer term condition that isn't going to change. And for those, we're developing the flag situation. So as they're processed this time round, they'll get that flag, which means next time round they won't need to be reassessed. We'll just need to confirm, get an up-to-date picture of them, because there's legislation around that. And it will be a kind of fast track process through. The consultant thing, not everyone will have a consultant. So it's no good me sitting here saying, right, I need a consultant's report, because not everybody will have one, which is where that kind of list of documents that might be sufficient to evidence your case will come in. So in some cases, it might be something from the GP, and in another case, there might be a consultant report that is infinitely more helpful in setting out a process. So that's why we're saying the evidence is not just a list I can give everybody and say, right, provide this, this and this. I can give a list of evidence that might suit, and they can pick out the ones that they have, and hopefully there's enough there to get the application through.
Yeah, just coming back, because that was the issue with the visitor to the last surgery, that had an existing one, had provided doctor's evidence, but was said, oh, we got to have a consultant, and that sort of delayed it further. So it's just kind of trying to get around that, that was an ongoing thing and it was a renewal, and I would have thought that it needn't have gone that far. So just trying to sort of circumvent that kind of problem.
Thanks, Councillor Trent. I think we might have to avoid going too much into individual cases, because I'm sure Linda can't speak to the specifics of any individual case tonight. Councillor Beagley, you wanted to come in.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I welcome the update, and I'm encouraged by the flag system, because it is a major bone of contention for those who are covered in that cohort, and I'm pleased to see that we are taking some proactive action over it. I've got two particular issues. The first is with regard to best practice across the local authority family in the country, and bear in mind what Councillor Martin said about contacting the LGA. I think outside of the political groups, there will be quite a lot of information that the LGA may be able to help us with. I'm particularly concerned about trying to glean everything I can from best practice, particularly in similar sized authorities, with perhaps sometimes similar profiles across parts of the resident population. So I'm wondering whether we have done that, because if we have been failing and we're improving, whether there are ways and lessons to be learned from other authorities that are doing it better or getting those times down more quickly. So that was the first thing. And the second is with regard to the transformation programme. This is the kind of council service that I would have thought would have been front and centre in transformation, and it's disappointing to see that the results haven't followed through. Am I wrong in thinking it was front and centre within transformation, along with hundreds of other issues, or am I missing something there? Because we've spent huge amounts of money on transformation, and these sorts of services, I think, were always going to be ones which would be picked up by that, and which would deliver for residents the benefits of local government reorganisation within BCP Council.
Okay. Who wanted to respond on those points? Linda first.
Yep.
Go ahead.
So yeah, in terms of best practice and speaking to others, we're doing that all the time. So our team leader was up at a conference in London a few weeks ago, listening and with other local authorities, listening to what the government department were thinking in the area of blue space. So we've got our eyes and ears on that. There seems to be something bubbling away. We're not quite sure what. So we'll be watching that. And we have been speaking to local authorities that have good results in terms of Blue Badge, and we've talked to those that are administering their own application form as opposed to using the government one. So we've looked at some of those forms with those councils to inform our own improvements. We've also our IT technical team are reaching out to some people that are using Dynamics in their authority. Dynamics is our CRM, to work out how they've managed to do some of the technical aspects of it. So yeah, that's all happening. In terms of transformation, so transformation, it was always the plan of transformation to go through all of our processes and improve them, and that's the space we're in now. So the transformation programme closed down earlier in the year, and that delivered all the systems, and that's where we got the updated CRM system from. At the point the transformation closed down, we'd put the new system in place, and then we took a year to take everything off of the old system and put it onto the new system. And that has given us defined service patterns, we call them, which underpin any kind of application process, pay process, booking process. So we have all that built out in the CRM. And Blue Badge is the first process that I'm using as almost like my prototype to work out how we take something that we know is inefficient, get it onto our new CRM, and do that eye looking at systems and things to make it more efficient. So the bit you're talking about, Councillor Beasley, is the bit that we're just starting to do. And hopefully once we've landed Blue Badge, the plan will be to go through every process, every large process within the customer contact centre, and do the same thing. Make use of the functionality that we got within the CRM system through transformation, and now make it talk.
Thank you very much. Councillor Martin.
Yeah, I just wanted to add in terms of the LGA, I've recently been given the contact, well, been in contact with the LGA's policy lead on transport and highways, and surprisingly, one of the things he said to me was that blue badges is not an area that we have prioritised, which I found strange. Having said that, he has said I do know some key people in the DFT, and I'm happy to put them in contact with you. So I'm now following up on directly with the DFT, but I think there's less been done by the LGA on blue badges than one might imagine, given what a big issue it is generally. So, although I know one local, I think it was the opposition group on Kent County Council, I've just recently passed a motion which is sent to government about changes they'd like to see. So I'm also in contact with them as well. So there is some work going on.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. And I think, if I may just come in quickly, I know we still have others wanting to speak, but on the LGA side of things, we do have from our previous look at the blue badges back in May, we do have an outstanding item on our recommendation tracker around, we requested raising the issue, specifically the cost of administering the blue badge scheme with the LGA, and I think the idea was a sort of a joined up approach to government from local authorities, saying, you know, we can't cover our costs. Can we address that? And I know obviously it sounds like you're in discussions with the LGA and other authorities. So is that a piece that's kind of ongoing? Is that part of the discussions you're having in that space at the moment?
Yeah, it is, and actually I hope to be able to report back to you fairly soon about that very issue. Now that I've got this contact with the senior highways and transport lead at the LGA, although as I've said, a little bit surprised that, you know, blue badge isn't more of a priority. But, you know, there we go. So yes, sorry, the short answer is yes.
Yeah, thank you. That's great. That's very clear. Councillor Canavan.
Yeah, it's just a quick question, really. I'm assuming that the numbers in this document are the total number of applications that are coming through the system. So what my question was, how many of those are we turning down? And does turning down an application cause you more work?
1% of badges are turned down. That's the current stat. And no, it doesn't cause us more work. It can do if there's an appeal and we have to refer it to an occupational health advisor or occupational therapy advisor. We do that in-house with adult social care, so we have to book time with them. They go off and they do an assessment and they will advise us on the appeal. But that is a fairly quick process that happens at the end of it. But yeah.
Thank you. Matty.
I was just going to add that in any of the process, if you only had 1% that was turned down, you might think, well, why have you got such a complicated process? Because you're clearly agreeing nearly all of them. But this particular process is governed by requirements that are set down by government. So, you know, and hopefully it does prevent. It's robust enough to prevent people from thinking that it'd be too easy to fraudulently apply for a badge. And so we get regularly audited on this process, and even in the report touches on this, but we introduced a quicker process, didn't we, to try and bring it down, and it worked really, really well. But that included a lighter touch, and clearly a lighter touch over time is likely to result in encouraging people perhaps to apply for a badge that they otherwise wouldn't be entitled to. So it is recognising that most people do get them, but unfortunately we still have to go through all the relevant processes to validate those applications.
Thank you. Any further speakers, people who haven't said anything yet? No, I just think that's been really helpful. Thank you very much. It's given me a lot of extra understanding of where we're at and what's going on. It's particularly interesting to hear about the plans for improving the system and the process to make that more efficient. And it sounds like there's some real potential there, which is great. And I hear the timescale that you've put around that being spring for that new system to be in place. It would seem sensible to me at this stage for us to perhaps keep this on our work plan and look again in 12 months, given time for the new system to come in and then be used for a bit to see what the difference that would make. So if the board agrees with me, I would suggest that would be our next step. I think the bit that I'm interested in that's been picked up by people tonight is how much better can we make it within the very tight constraints we have in terms of staffing, by improving the system. How, I'm not asking you to give me a number, like a percentage better, but how much more can we do by improving tech and IT and systems, and how much does that still leave us needing actually more resource, albeit given the situation we're in, the council being very unlikely we'd get that more resource right now, but perhaps something for us to keep an eye on in the next 12 months and see, you know, how much of a difference can those improvements in system make, and then take it on from there. Councillor Tarling, you wanting to say
Yeah, I was
something?
just going to very briefly just answer your question. I think we should be going for compliance. Anything more is spending money. So you know, compliance with the target and making sure we're 100% compliant, and that's where we should be heading for.
Yes, sure. But what we're seeing is a pattern of getting better than and then getting worse than, and what we want to see is it getting reliably even and within, yeah. But whether that happens through the plans is the interesting part, I suppose, isn't it? We'll have to wait and see. Anyway, thank you very much to everybody who's come in to talk to us about blue badges. I really appreciate your time and everything you've brought to us this evening. Thank you very much. If it's all right, I might give us a 5-minute comfort break at this point, and before we move on to the annual report, if that's okay. Just 5 minutes, please, if that's all right. Okay, we are back online, everybody. If I could ask for your attention. Thank you. So we're moving on now to item 12, which is the Overview and Scrutiny Annual Report. So this is, as the name suggests, an annual report which on the activity of the Overview and Scrutiny function across the council. So not just this board, but the committees as well. So I'm going to ask Lindsay Marshall, our scrutiny specialist, to introduce the report and start us off, please, if that's okay.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to take it as read, this report, in terms of the main content and certainly the appendix, which sets out all of the activity that's been taking place in Overview and Scrutiny in the previous municipal year. Just to outline the process around it, there are recommendations in the report that you're being asked to comment on. This report will go through all the 4 ONS committees, but we're expecting that any substantive discussion will take place here today, and the other ONS chairs have been invited to attend for that reason. The other ONS committees, the report is going to be listed for noting, and then it will go on to council, where council, if there are any decisions to be made, they will be made at council. So you're being asked if you want to comment on those today. Before I move on to talk about the actual recommendations, I did just want to reflect in particular on one achievement that we've made in ONS. You'll see in the appendix that there's a few achievements that we have outlined, but I really want to reflect on the development of the culture around ONS in BCP, and I think that's really important because for those who can think back to the best value work that we had in 2023, there were criticisms around the ONS culture in particular, behaviours, the environment not being conducive to scrutiny, a heavy balance around pre-decision work. We've addressed those and we have continued to retain a good balance of work around those. And all of those reflections, I think, spoke to the culture around ONS at BCP. And now my view is that we're in a really good, healthy position with the culture that supports ONS, and the statutory guidance is really clear on the fact that culture is the #1 most important thing that will lead to good scrutiny outcomes. So you know, cabinet and senior officers engaging well with scrutiny, being confident to come to scrutiny even with difficult discussions. We've seen tonight being willing to come before scrutiny, bringing information when asked, a good common understanding of the aims and purpose of scrutiny, and particularly those senior leader positions engaging well. I think we're in a really healthy position there, and so I think that's really important to just reflect on, because being in that position means that we're in a place to really then maximise our scrutiny outcomes. And I think that through writing this report this year, reflecting and then engaging with the ONS chairs and vice chairs, we really felt that we're now in a position to sort of move things up a notch and get to a place where we're really adding value and demonstrating what that value is through scrutiny on a really consistent basis. And in terms of achieving that, the biggest hurdle we've got is our resource. And I think my report is quite frank around that, and previous reports are too, that the resource is just not enough for the level of work that we have. We have 27 meetings in the diary. They have added cumulatively through the years. And we also have the ability under the Constitution to undertake 4 pieces of in-depth work, sort of working groups mainly we would call those, but it could be, you know, inquiry days or sessions that you have in committee, anything that requires significant support and scoping. Those can be taking place concurrently across all committees at once. And what that has meant is, in the last year, that has been happening. All the committees are doing that level of work. All the meetings are taking place, and some of the in-depth pieces of work are not progressing in a timely way. We're not able to give the level of scoping support that we would like to. And we've also seen a really significant increase in recommendations from council and councillors bringing topics to scrutiny. And I think there's a sense of frustration that if there are topics suggested, particularly from council, that might be really rooted in community concerns that have come from, you know, ward insight from councillors, that these are not being addressed in a timely way. So we wanted to look at the resource we've got and see how we can be a bit more innovative with it, and make sure that we are really leading to those impactful outcomes. So moving on to the recommendations of the report, just to be really clear on what those are, the suggestion is basically that we increase the quality over quantity in terms of our ONS work, so that we have a tighter grip around the use of our resource for ONS and when we apply it. So instead of having 4 concurrent pieces of in-depth work, let's say working groups for ease of understanding, taking place at a time, 1 in each committee, we would suggest that we have 1 taking place per across the whole function at once, complete that piece of work and then move on to the next one. And that the ONS chairs would take a more leading role in terms of determining what the order of those should be. And also that they provide some more test and challenge for the scopes of work that we undertake, so that we're just sort of challenging ourselves to tighten up our scoping and make sure we're leading to really good outcomes. What is not changing is there isn't a suggestion that committees don't set their own work programmes. So in terms of what you put on your agendas, the reports that you ask brought into your meetings, unless they are really in-depth pieces of work that need a lot of scoping, we're suggesting that that stays the same. Each committee retains their own work programmes. And I don't necessarily think that this will lead to less work taking place over a period of time, like a year. It's just about it progressing in a more orderly and focused way and completing 1 piece of work before moving on to the other. Members can also still suggest topics. That's a statutory right, so none of that is changing. And we're not recommending changes to the scrutiny structure or meeting numbers, although you'll see those are listed as options because they would also be things that would help to address the resource challenges we're facing. Within the appendix, and I think I've referenced in the main report as well, we're also encouraging more of a member-led approach, because you as members are a resource for scrutiny, and we've seen some really effective work where members have taken on that rapporteur role, so they champion an issue and they go away, do some research and bring comments back. So I think that all the chairs are keen to embed that even further. And that's another way of making more use of our resource and maybe moving on some more specific issues in a quicker way. So I think that sets out the recommendations, but I'm very happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. So if I can ask for the board to have, if they have any questions for Lindsay or any comments on this report, please. Councillor Tarling.
Yeah, thank you, Lindsay. You mentioned about resources and development. I mean, is there a development plan for resources? I know, as we heard in an earlier meeting, that as a council, we're looking to save time and costs. I was looking at the graph you've got here of FTEs against the number of meetings, and yes, it looks quite horrible. If I was in your shoes, so I'd go, that's not fair. I want more money. But the upshot is development of staff. Is this overview and scrutiny is such a key at the heart of the council? Are we looking in developing staff at the moment and bringing in sort of either fresh blood from outside or trainees sort of in this into this thing? Where are we looking to go with this?
I'll start that, but Richard Jones, who's our head, might take over. I mean, we do have, just to be really clear, scrutiny is resourced by the Democratic Services team. We have different levels of Democratic Services officers within there, and overview and scrutiny is written into their job role as well. It's in their job title. So we refer to them as dual hatters, so they'll do scrutiny work officers here tonight will do scrutiny work, but they will also support other committees. So where other work increases, their ability to work on scrutiny decreases. So they have a proportion of their time for scrutiny, and we have different levels of officers within there. So more junior and more senior, and obviously there's development that goes with that. There is one dedicated scrutiny resource, and that is me. So if there is a lot of pressure in the rest of the team, scrutiny resource is quite limited. That's what I would say, but I don't know if Richard wants to say anything else about development within the team.
Through you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, obviously Tan is here today, joined the team fairly recently, and certainly we're looking to develop in-house and recruit in-house. That's partly driven by a difficulty of recruitment. If I be honest, we've had vacancies that have remained vacant for some time, so we do look and explore different ways of developing, and I'm grateful that Tan has joined the team, and we've had others that go through that process. As Lindsay has said, everyone has that dual responsibility within their job description. I think one of the issues we've tried to do for Lindsay is to ensure that Lindsay's resource is dedicated to a specialist role and that she doesn't get drawn into supporting the democratic services side. And that's difficult sometimes because it is member contacts and the public contacts and so on. So there is only one Lindsay, but it's managing that. It's making sure that we allow Lindsay to focus on that area, and we develop the rest of the team to support Lindsay in that process. But it is that balance, because there are conflicting pressures from other committees. Other committees will decide they wish to have extra meetings, and we have to meet them. We have to support those particular committees. And we saw probably last year, I think it was, the additional planning committee that was created placed a lot of workload. So that graph is reflective of some of those changes that council has made. But yeah, we've recognised the pressures on budgets, and that dip was in order to achieve a 15% reduction in that particular year.
Thank you very much, Richard. Any other people wanting to speak? I might just follow on from that, if I may, then. Option D in the report does speak to that, increasing the resource as a possible option, but it's not been brought forward in detail through the report for the reasons we all understand around, you know, the dire state of the council's finances and the fact that, you know, that does mean more people and more cost. But I did, to my mind, in a world where we don't have to worry about that, that's clearly the best option of all of them, would be to increase the resource in terms of officer support for overview and scrutiny. As Councillor Tarling says, it is at the heart of the council's work. It's really important, and it's nice to hear your perspective, Lindsay, that we're getting better at it and getting quite good at it, and therefore resourcing it better would seem to be the ideal way forward. I understand why that's not easy, but my question was just around whether or not going forwards from this report we could keep some avenue of exploration open around that, as well as we need to take these recommendations forward. I think they are the right ones for now, but can we keep something open around the discussion around can we look at resourcing scrutiny a bit better to make sure that we can do as much work as we all clearly want to do, to make it a really effective function. Yes, go ahead, Councillor Tarling.
Yeah, it's always quite challenging. I know certainly. I mean, I proposed a motion regarding the nutrients situation went to environment and place, and I'm very aware that every time a motion, and you mentioned it, you know, council motions go forward and get recommended to go to scrutiny. And one of the things that does get quite frustrating from our side as councillors, you know, or as a council, as a body corporate, is that, you know, we come up with these things we want looking at, and we sort of there's nothing against you or the whole of Dem Services, but it's a lot of work to produce that information, to go do the research, to provide the information, the backup and reports for the various committees. And I'm assuming a lot of that goes to the various sort of other heads of departments. You know, you request information, and I think a little bit more sort of feedback. I think on the challenges you're facing, be that internal, as in dealing with other departments. To say, well, we have asked this department for that information, and we're that's pending. I think is quite useful, because we can then say, well, maybe the problem isn't the scrutiny piece of work that's being done. It's the source by which you're trying to get the information from, and it's that sort of, you know, using the river term, it's the sort of swimming upstream. You know, if no water's coming out the end of the pipe, we go to the top of the pipe, not the other end of the pipe, to find out why there's an issue. And I think, you know, as a committees, we should be supporting that work, and I just think letting us know where the problems are, because it can get frustrating if you put a motion down, or a motion goes down that, you know, you think, okay, well, that's 2 years' time, I'll get a report, and, you know, we'll maybe get a decision that goes to cabinet in 3, and you know, we all want instant results, but understanding why that isn't happening is probably quite key. And it's education of members as well. I know I've done a few of the CFGS, is that right? Mm-hmm. CFGS courses that are very good, and, you know, I don't think they're actually mandatory, are they? But they should be, especially for those that sit on committees. So, yeah, it really is just that, keeping that conversation going with the committee members. Thanks.
Thank you. Lindsay, you want to respond?
Yeah, I think you raised some really important points there, and as I said, I recognise the frustrations, particularly when things are raised at council and members. They're generally really quite burning issues, and that members and groups of members really want to push forward. What you're talking about in terms of like finding out information from other departments to move things forward, that is very much, I think, what causes the bottleneck, but not from the sense that departments don't work with us to bring the information, but simply that takes a huge amount of resource to have that level of communication with other departments on multiple issues at the same time. And sometimes we might see, well, today we've got 3 recommendations that are on the agenda that have come through from council. So if we were to continually be doing that level of work all concurrently, I can't sort of overestimate how much resource that takes to find the right person, to have the conversations, you know, to dig, because good scrutiny is a lot of digging to find out the right stuff. So one of the ways in which we're aiming to maximise the resource, as I mentioned, is by using rapporteurs more. And I think that a lot of the work that holds us up and causes that bottleneck, members can do themselves. So not to land it all in your laps, but I think we've seen that that's been effective. And particularly if a member is at council and raises a motion, they're generally really passionate about it. They have some background information already. They've got a good understanding of it. They can do the work that we do in terms of finding out more information. And almost every piece of scrutiny needs to start with a sort of background briefing before you can say, what are we going to add value with? What's our scope going to be? We need to understand the basis of the issue, the why, all of that. So members can go and do that as rapporteurs and then bring that back to committee. And the committees can endorse that role so that officers know why members are coming to them asking for information. And it's already happening. Environment and Place have been doing it quite well. We can do that, I think, a lot more. And I think that will also naturally mean that the issues that people are most passionate about will get advanced. And if people really aren't that bothered, the work probably won't happen. So I think that will really help us. And if members are up for that, I'd really encourage it. I would just say, I know that chairs and vice chairs had asked me to highlight this in the report, which I have, that when things do come through from council, I do think that they need to be given a greater weight when you're considering whether to add them to work programmes, because they come with the emphasis of council behind them. However, it is for each committee to decide whether or not they do that work. And just because it's come from council doesn't mean that committees should be compelled to do that work. So I think it's really important that we do make that distinction.
Thank you, Lindsay. the monitoring officer, Robin Watson, has his hand up online. Robin, would you like to come in?
Thank you, Jen. Sorry for not being with you this evening, but I just wanted to, it would be right for me to sit here without thanking all the Democratic Services and the Democratic Services officers, and including Lindsay this evening for the great work on the report. So just to express my great gratitude for them and for Richard and the work they do, and to give you a reassurance that Lindsay and I have spoken recently. So that sort of, if you like, shift in culture, focus, and some of that preempting what may come through these committees is something that's on Lindsay's radar, and she's very much pushing that towards us as well, which is right, and that sits at C and B as well. So it's to reassure members that it's a two-way thing, and I think this is all about good governance, being that critical friend to fellow members and cabinet and council, which we've seen this evening in with some of those late items that come through with regard to FC Bournemouth. I think that works really, really well. But of course, we can always do better. But just as a final flag, we had a London Borough that came to visit Richard and Lindsay to see how we do this. And I think that's always a great accolade. As Councillor Beasley was saying earlier about learning from others, we're quite proud that others come to see us, which is great. So yeah, thank you to all chairs for the work you do, and also to all of our officers as well who make this work. And just thank you very much.
Thank you, Robin. Yeah, Councillor Goodall.
I just wanted to pick up on what Councillor Mike Tarling was saying. It's just that sometimes as a member of this particular meeting, I get confused sometimes about what we're supposed to be doing and how we're going through with it. And I just wondered, there were a number of, not so much just comments, not questions even, but we have this issue at the beginning. There's the logo of why: improve people's quality of life, getting the best for residents. Quite often that's a microcosm as opposed to an issue of broader governance, but something that can be brought in and is affecting other councillors as well. So we're, if you like, at the sharp end, we are dealing with our relative bubbles, but these are things that quite often don't get dealt with because we are dealing with broader issues. So the question I ask is whether or not this is right or proper, or whether we should be looking at, for example, 60% of our work, according to one of the graphics, is in scrutinising pre-decision material that goes through to cabinet or council. And I know that call-ins is the last resort, but you sometimes think that when there's an issue, perhaps at a ward level, then perhaps we should be doing that, because we can get a quick response from the relevant officers, because we're begging the question. That can be dealt with swiftly, and then so we don't have to. We're sorting out the broader issues, because many of the broader terms of governance we're dealing with. So the question is, do we have to deal with 60% of the material that goes to cabinet, in the sense that cabinet on occasions have been known to ignore, or at least comment alternative comments to the recommendations that we've made. Sorry, that was a bit of a roundabout way of saying something that I shouldn't say. But anyway, I just wanted to make those points, and whether or not it was relevant to what we're discussing now. Thank you.
Lindsay, did you want to come back on what Councillor Goodall's saying there?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely correct that we want to be looking at issues that have an impact on our communities. In scrutiny, should be looking at strategic issues. So we want to be looking at something that's going to have the biggest impact, the widest impact that we can. But the ideal is to be looking at things that we know are going to have a chance of impact, a chance of implementation, and an impact that's tangible as well. And so I would always encourage members to bring forward those ward issues, because it may be something that affects a small ward, but when you look at it and consider it, it may be something that we become aware is a wider issue, and so becomes more strategic. So that is your role as scrutiny councillors. That is why you're in the position that you are, because you can bring that community insight and reflect that into scrutiny, and that is a really key tenet of scrutiny. So that's really important. just to address the 60% of pre-decision scrutiny that you were referring to, that's in the Appendix 2 under the ONS board. I think yes, it's important to reflect on the balance of work that you do. It's a judgment call for members how much work you do that is cabinet pre-decision work, how much is other sort of proactive work. The only thing I would say is that it's obviously going to be higher at ONS board because the board is naturally set up to track cabinet so that you can look at cabinet items. So it's understandable that a lot of your workload is going to align to looking at cabinet reports. I think what we're trying to achieve through what we're suggesting in terms of changing how we use our resource a bit is that we could help you, if we have the resource, we could help you to spend that little bit of extra time reflecting on what's coming up and how you can really add value with everything you do, including your pre-decision work and looking at cabinet reports. So sometimes it's about just saying, what other information could we ask for, or who else could we get in the room to widen our discussion on this cabinet report so that we actually bring something to the table, because the report's being looked at cabinet anyway. So with everything we want to be able to reflect and add value in that way. And I think that's what we're trying to get to through our suggestions about releasing resource.
Thank you, Lindsay. Haven't seen anyone else indicating. So I'm just a couple of things I wanted to say. Like Robin, I did want to start by just saying thank you to Lindsay for the report, but to Claire, to everyone in Democratic Services for all the hard work and all the support that we get in Scrutiny. I really value the support that you give. It's absolutely fantastic. And I think it's great to hear that other local authorities are coming to look at us. I haven't been a councillor in any other local authority, so I don't know, but I feel like we do have a really great level of support from officers in this particular function, and I'm really grateful for it. So big thank you. I just wanted to ask about the I know it's probably in the report, but if you wouldn't mind just helping me to pull it out. In terms of over the 24-25 year, are you able to tell me how many bits of in-depth work were undertaken across the board and the committees in the 12-month period? Do you know that number off the top of your head? If you don't worry, or rough number, because I haven't picked that out of the report myself.
I think I haven't got that off the top of my head, but if we were to look through the appendix, I think we've probably got about one working group per committee, and then plus we've done budget working groups. So yeah, that was like another working group per committee. So more than 4. Yeah. Okay. But please don't tie me to that.
No, I'm not going to. It was just from my kind of thinking about, because you've said in your when you presented the report that you feel that the proposal that we've got in front of us about one at a time across all committees and the board won't reduce the number of bits of work. It will make them each work better, and we'll be able to get move on from one to the next more efficiently. And I understand that, and I hope that's going to be what happens. So I just wanted to kind of get a feel in my head of what that might look like. So if we're talking about 4, then you've kind of got 2 or 3 months per piece of work, I suppose, across the year. And it can sort of look at it like that. It was just to get it clear in my head, really.
Yeah, Chair, just to come back on that. I think that is how we are viewing it. It is going to have to be something that we try and see and definitely reflect on. So it's kind of impossible to put a figure on it, because some pieces of in-depth work are quicker and some are longer, and it really is also going to depend on whether you want to commission a piece of work that's really in-depth, that involves lots of different sessions or not. And indeed, what we've done in the past has all been very variable. So it's really hard to say, but I think we just need to keep that under review and see if doing it in the way that we're now proposing does make a difference, or is there something else we need to look at. But I think we ought to be open to trying and challenging ourselves and seeing what it does for us.
Thank you. Yeah, and I agree. We need to try to improve and move to test things and see if they work to a certain extent. Councillor Waite, you indicated.
Thank you. It was
Something that you just said a minute ago, and I'm struggling to hold it in my mind now about. Sorry, would you be able to come back to me?
Of course.
Thank you.
No problem. I wanted to have another comment that I wanted to make, which we've touched already on the topic of encouraging more use of the rapporteur style. And I noticed you've referred to what my specific point a little bit in the report as well, but I wanted to highlight it, which is that I'm very supportive of that as an approach, and we have an open rapporteur piece of work going on in the board at the moment with Councillor Chapman-Law. But what I'm noticing with that piece of work is that he's been slightly struggling to get it off the ground with officers. And I appreciate that officers are super busy and have a lot on their plates. But I think what it's highlighting to me is that if we're going to put a bit more reliance on rapporteur style work, then perhaps something that would be useful to put in place at the same time would be a little bit of guidance out to officers around this is how ONS are going to be potentially increasingly operating. And so if councillors come direct to you to talk about a thing, it's a bit like if Lindsay comes and talks to you about a thing. And try and put that culture in place at this stage to build that in, if that makes sense. So that's just a comment back really on that. So Claire, Councillor Waite, did you
Thank you.
remember what you were going to say?
I made a couple of notes now. It was what you were saying about doing the one project at a time, and it occurs to me that sometimes things stall, perhaps because the members involved are away on holiday, or department heads are tied up with things, or you've got an inspection going on at the same time, and would we really want that to hold up the whole queue of work? And so though I can see the benefits of doing one thing at a time, should we have the flexibility, and do you need us to put in a recommendation to affect this, that if for any reason project A needs to be put on hold, it's okay, no further work's going to be done, we can bring forward project B, C, whatever, and then once that's concluded, the project that was held then takes priority to come back. So if we think that's a sensible thing to do you need us to kind of give that mandate? Can you just do that off of your own back? What do you need from us?
Yeah, I think we're suggesting changes to the Constitution so the sort of principle is set in place, but I think we would certainly be looking to be pragmatic with how we approach things. And you're right, sometimes that does happen. So we wouldn't be looking to say, right, no work's going to happen, because that we haven't progressed this yet. Written into the recommendations is that when one piece of work has commenced, the next piece of work can be scoped. So whether it's that you scope further issues, or whether you commence other work, I think certainly we'd take a pragmatic approach. And the other element that I mentioned is that the ONS chairs and vice chairs group, who now will, if the recommendations go through, would have the responsibility for monitoring that use of resource. They have monthly meetings in the diary, so I think it'd be very much a case of having that regular ongoing dialogue with them, of saying, look, this isn't happening, let's move on to that, and then come back to this. So very much so that they have that oversight and are in the loop. So I don't think it in response, I don't think it needs a specific recommendation. I think the flexibility could be there. Yeah.
That's great, thank you. Was there anybody else had any comments or questions on this? I'd like to say that personally I'm supportive of the recommendations in the report, and I think having talked it through as chairs and vice chairs, we were happy for those to come forward. I'm not hearing anyone in the room speaking out overtly to say they don't approve the recommendations, or they can't support them. So I'd be happy to propose that we accept those recommendations, take those forward to council for them to be signed off, and so that we can move forward with overview and scrutiny work. One thing in particular that I'm really keen to do, and that we need to kind of move through this report to do, is get onto our work programming for the year ahead, which we haven't been able to do, partly because of the resourcing issues that are coming through in this report that we're trying to address. So I'm very keen that we do that, and then we can in the new year, hopefully we can sit down and start planning ahead and getting some of our proactive scrutiny in place and some of those key issues that you want to be pulling out from all of you and all of your key areas of interest. So is everybody, well, I guess I need a seconder for my proposal that we support the recommendations. I have one. Councillor Tarling, thank you. Can I see if we have a consensus to support the recommendations in the report? Okay, it looks as though we do. That's great. All right, well, thank you very much, Lindsay. It's been very helpful to go through that. Excellent. Good. Okay, moving on then, we have got the work plan, and as part of that, we've still got to look at the recommendations that have come through from council, 3 recommendations from council. Lindsay, I'm going to hand over to you and ask how you'd like to do this. Do you want to do the recommendations and then the work plan, or vice versa?
Do you want to just address those recommendations from council, because they might need a little bit of discussion, and as ever, I think what we find with those is it's not necessarily timetabling them in immediately, but on principle, do you want to go ahead with them?
Yeah, yes.
So I'm going to start this off, and Claire, who wrote this report, may come in and pick up any detail if I've missed anything. So we've got 3 recommendations that have come in from council, and I think Councillor Canavan will come in a minute and speak to those, because they were originally moved by him at council. There are 2 which relate to the issue of managing seasonal parking pressures. The first issue referred to scrutiny was, to quote, to ask the Overview and Scrutiny Board to undertake a review of the recent parking consultation with the aim of improving future engagement processes. This review to include feedback from residents, business owners, tourism representatives and other stakeholders. Now, this recommendation was made some time ago at council. It's taken a little while for this to filter through to ONS board. And as the board will know, you've got a public consultations working group ongoing, which has picked up and reflected on the particular issue that is raised here. So I think in terms of that, we are feeling that the board is already addressing to a certain degree, although not necessarily in terms of all the stakeholders that are listed within that suggestion from council. The second part is a further amendment that was made at council under the same motion, and it said that this is brought back to Environment and Place for further scrutiny, and I think that we were seeking further clarity from Councillor Canavan about what that means. So I think if I pause there and you discuss that particular one, and then we'll move on to the final one.
In the reports, 28 in the pack. In my pack anyway. Yes, thank you, Lindsay. So I think to take the first point around the consultation and the bringing the issue of that parking consultation into that, I feel that that request from council has been taken into account and has been addressed through the working group, which will be reporting back to the board hopefully in January. That's the plan. And therefore I think that one we may be able to sort of park and say that's dealt with. But Councillor Canavan, if you have any concerns about that, then you should absolutely let me know. Councillor Tarling, you indicated that you need to speak.
Yeah, just on the parking one, I know we're going through a parking review at the moment, because I have a few things. I know the portfolio holder's actually in the back of the room. I'm sorry to wake him up, but I think as the work's ongoing at the moment with the parking review, it would probably be right to hold off.
And this was specifically around the way that the consultation was put out. It was not about parking itself, but about how we consulted on a particular proposal. So it fell within the consultation working group kind of sphere. Councillor Canavan, did you want to comment at this point on that first part?
Well, I think there's 2 issues, Chair, within that first part. One One is the issue of the consultation process itself and whether that was appropriate or right, or whether it could be improved. That's one small aspect, and I'm not aware that it's been discussed anywhere at all, frankly. So if it is, somebody needs to tell me because it's invisible to me. But the other thing is on the parking strategy more broadly, that's what this motion was about. That's what I'm expecting to see.
Mhm.
So if there's some group of people somewhere thinking about a parking strategy, then I'd like to see it.
Again, just to clarify, the bit that I was talking about is the consultation side.
Yes, I know that.
Yeah, so that's the bit that I think I feel as a member of the consultation working group, that it is.
Well,
It is in train that we are looking at what
Where-
happened with that consultation.
where's the consultation with the stakeholders that's mentioned in this motion? Where's the consultation with councillors? Because there's been none with me,
Right.
and there's been none with my colleagues who are significantly going to be significantly affected by the original proposals. None of that's happened. So if there's somebody looking at that, they ain't talking to anybody that they should be talking to, as far as I can see.
Okay. Okay. So
Group of people just talking to themselves, then, isn't it?
it's a working group which was already in place and had already been put into place before this motion came through council, and has been extended to take account of the consultation that this motion referred to, but also other things like CGR. And as a working group, we have spent quite a bit of time talking about what we're doing with consultation, whether that's right, whether it's the right approach, what we should be doing differently. We've engaged with officers from different areas of the council on this, but I appreciate what you're saying, Councillor Canavan, and we have at least one more meeting of the working group plan, so perhaps it's something for us to, as a working group, to reflect on further in terms of how we make sure we are not missing anything, and then take it on. As I said, that working group, we're intending to feedback the outcomes of that in January, so we can take that away. I'm sort of acting chair of that working group because Councillor Aikenhead is actually the chair, but she's on sick leave at the moment. Yeah, if that's okay with you, I'm certainly not saying there's nothing to see here. I'm just, I wonder if we take that through the working group. We take that on through the working group rather than anything in any other direction at the moment.
Well, perhaps somebody could talk to the stakeholders that's mentioned in the motion. That would be a start, wouldn't it?
I think that's what I'm saying. Through the working group, we'll take that a bit further. Yeah.
Thank you. Just to be really clear, the working group, the board discussed and agreed to extend the scope of the working group to include the consultation as we're discussing now. So I want to just be really clear that that was a collective decision publicly made, and that work has been ongoing. So I think what the board needs to do now is make a call, because the working group, as the chair said, is getting close to conclusion. So if it were to extend its remit further, that will be beyond the current scope. So if it's to extend its remit in line with what the motion is proposing that has been referred to you, that is something that you need to weigh up against the resource that you have and the fact that that will delay other work. So you need to decide whether you want, as a board, to agree to that or not. I don't think it's appropriate to just delegate that to the working group to decide, because they won't have clarity over what they're doing. And I know from supporting the working group that they have considered very carefully about who they speak to and why, and they are taking a very evidence-led approach. So I think it's absolutely important that they have clarity on the next steps from this board.
Well, if they want clarity, they can ask for it.
Councillor Tarling.
Yeah, I think it's sorry, I wasn't aware of this this working group. Apologies being a substitute on here, but it sounds really easy to me. The working group is the Overview Scrutiny Board working group on parking. Is that correct?
No, it's on consultation.
Sorry, so on the consultations generally. Ah, right, okay, sorry, I thought it was just, okay, that's right. Got it, thank you. Yeah, I'm trying to keep up. So it would sound like if the parking consultation is part of the consultations working group, to let that run its course. I take Councillor Canavan's point, but if you're saying that's going to complete in January, is that correct?
That's the intention. Is
so it would make sense to put that report back into the subsequent OSB meeting, so that report can be considered by Councillor Canavan, and by all means the working group may wish to include him in an early draft releases or feedback as they see fit. But I think it's for that working party to then give that feedback to members of this board, potentially Councillor Canavan if that's appropriate, ahead of time, and let that run its course.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Tining. Councillor Wright.
Yeah, just if it would be helpful, the consultation working group, we're not looking at parking. We're using parking and CGR as examples to look at to improve consultations in general. That's what we're doing. It just happens to be that we've looked at a couple of smaller ones as well. Those two are pretty contentious, so we were looking at those, but we've also looked at some ones that have flown through sort of thing, easier ones, and doing traffic light systems and other things like that. But we're looking at improving the way we do consultations.
Thank you, yes. And I think what I'm picking up from Councillor Canavan is he doesn't consider that to be meeting the request made at council for ONS board to look at specifically at the parking consultation that happened in the summer. So, I mean, if that's the case, then I guess, as Lindsay said, then we need to, as a board, we need to decide if that's another piece of work that we're going to take on separately. So, personally, I feel that we are sufficiently addressing it through the working group, but that is just my personal opinion, and others may say their opinions. So, well, yeah. What are we doing? Are we proposing? I need a proposal, because my proposal is it's fine.
I'm going to make that proposal. I propose that this is considered in greater detail following the recommendations from the consultations committee.
Okay.
So consider the following OSB.
In other words, we put it on the work plan for further review post consultation working group closure.
Whatever the next meeting after the January board date is.
I would be happy with that. Anybody have any concerns about that? Okay, good. Sounds like that's what we're going to do. Good. Oh. Sorry, that was what I meant. Did anyone have any concern? No. So okay. All right, then we will do a vote then in that case. So all those in favour of that proposal to put this item, I mean, it seems a little OTT to do this voting. Put this item on the work plan to look at again after the board meeting in January. All those in favour?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 in favour.
And any against? Okay, thank you. One against.
And one abstention.
Sorry, and one abstention. Okay. The second part of that motion, as Lindsay mentioned, was that the wording is that this amended motion is brought to environment and place for further scrutiny. I appreciate this isn't environment and place, but there is a note in the report around how parking is divided between in the remit of the ONS board and the Environment and Place Committee, and because the other issues of this motion really pertain to parking enforcement, which falls within the remit of the board. That's why it's come to us for discussion. So, Councillor Canavan, would you like to speak to that part?
Well, I hope at some point we're going to come back to the actual substantive point of this motion in the first place, which is about a review of the parking strategy, because we've ignored that so far. So the issue about reference to environment and place was specifically about the community pact, because that was already something which had been referred to environment and place, but hadn't really progressed very far. And the point of that reference to environment and place was for them to develop what we described as a community pact with van dwellers. So that was all set out in the original motion that went to environment and place in the first place. So because very little progress has been made about that, that's why this was included in this particular motion. So that's what that motion asks for. It's just a reminder to environment and place that that bit of work which we've asked them to do still needs to be done.
Okay. Well, then I think we can park that because that's not a matter for this board. Lindsay would like to come in, I think.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I think there's just a little bit of cross wires in terms of what we're talking about. So I apologise, I'm not in the Modern Gov, but in terms of the council minutes extract, which is the appendix, the report, if we scroll to the very end of that document, we are referring to point H of the motion, which is still talking about the parking strategy. And at the very end, an amendment was made to that motion that said this is brought to environment and place for further scrutiny. So we're still talking about the parking strategy element, and just looking for a bit more clarity, I think, around exactly what we were was hoped that scrutiny could be looking at through that. And then we will move on to the housing related recommendation.
Well, I'm just going to repeat what I've just said again. So yes, that's what paragraph H does, but the point about the parking strategy was one of the things that we were seeking in this motion. One of the ingredients in that was the community pact. So this is about within the regime of parking. This is about what are we doing, or what are we going to do about the increased use of motorhomes on the seafront.
I think
that was the specific part of the overall parking thing that we were seeking to get some attention to. So that's why it's in the motion.
Okay, thank you.
So the bit that I'm asking environment and place to look at, it's not the overall parking strategy. I don't think it's for them to do that. It's for us to do that in this committee. But what I am asking them to do that is that particular aspect of the increased use of motorhomes along the seafront.
Okay. Lindsay, go ahead.
So just to input then on that, thank you for clarifying that. So what Councillor Canavan's referring to is a motion that was referred into Environment Place, is referred to as van life. It's on their work programme. It is well scoped and work is progressing around it. And it was timetabled for a scrutiny session at the start of the autumn. And unfortunately, we weren't able to get all the key players around the table for various reasons, despite a lot of resource and contact put into that. So the chair communicated with his board and made the decision to delay that. And we've since done a bit further work around that. We have kept Councillor Peter Cooper well in the loop with that, because I believe he raised that recommendation. So I'm hoping that he is, and I know that he was comfortable with the position that that was in. And so it's really a case of watch this space, but that is certainly on that work programme and hasn't been lost sight of. So if that particular recommendation that we are discussing now really aligns to that, I would say that there isn't a need to make an additional agreement for scrutiny work on top of the van life work that is in progress.
Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Canavan.
I would just make a request that nobody speaks on behalf of my group when I'm here. So if Peter Cooper is satisfied, he will tell me he's satisfied. I don't need that to be translated for me. So I'm making the point again that this ought to be on the environment and place group discussion specifically on that aspect, and that what we should be looking at is the broader parking strategy, and we still haven't discussed that.
What I'm understanding from Councillor Canavan is that he feels that there is a request to this board to look at the parking strategy that came through this motion. I don't think that has been clearly outlined in this report. I think there are crossed wires going on here, fairly significant ones. I'm going to suggest we go away and look at it again outside of the meeting, if I may, because I don't think we're going to resolve it in this setting tonight. It seems too tangled. So I'm going to suggest that we take that away, work on that, look at that again, and bring that back to our next meeting to have another to look at it instead. Councillor Beasley.
Thank you, Chair. Well, in an attempt to untangle it, what I would suggest is that an informative note is sent from this board to that committee, reflecting the conversation that we've heard with Councillor Canavan and officers thus far, so that it does get back onto their agenda in a timely way, because if it doesn't, I can see that next summer will be on our horizon very quickly, and the matter will not have been even discussed by them unless that informative note is put forward as soon as possible. That would be the normal procedure, and I would recommend that that's what we should do.
Okay, thank you. My understanding is that there is no delay to any work going on at another committee. There is a confusion as to whether council has asked the board to look at something through this motion, other than the parking consultation, which we've talked about already. So I think the work that is going on through Environment and Place, it sounds as though is well underway. But, I mean, we can certainly make a note to just make double sure it is. But I think from what Lindsay's saying, it absolutely is. I think the issue is that we have a bit of a misunderstanding here about a different request potentially that may be in the motion around over review and scrutiny board. So, Lindsay.
Can I make a suggestion that might help? Fortuitously, there is a meeting of the ONS chairs group, chairs and vice chairs, in the diary for this Friday, and this could be something that we raise there and just explore and all understand where the work is at and what we want to achieve through it.
I'd be very happy to do that. Is that acceptable to you, Councillor Canavan? No. Okay. Would you expand on that? No.
We're still not dealing with this motion, are we?
Because for the reasons I've just outlined, I think we're talking at cross purposes. I don't think we're going to resolve it in this meeting. Could we take it to our chairs meeting where we can have a more...
I don't think it's a matter for the chairs. This is a motion which we submitted, which was
But we're
agreed by
confused
council.
as to what we're being asked to do and what officers have understood and put into a report versus what your understanding is. So I'm just saying I think pragmatically we're not going to resolve it in this meeting. Could we take it to our chairs meeting, bring it back to the next month's meeting, please? Councillor Beasley.
Sure, it's for exactly that reason that I suggested you use the facility of an informative note. It's normal procedure, and it would help, I think, enormously to bridge the gap that I can see happening right now.
I'm not sure who the note would need to go to, though, because there's no other committee involved. The confusion is between officer understanding of the report and a councillor's understanding of what is being asked for in the motion.
That wasn't, Chair, my understanding of the debate that's taken place so far, on which I think we've spent probably sufficient time.
Yeah, which is why I'm trying to move us on.
Well, I was only trying to be helpful.
Okay.
It's for officers to say whether what I've suggested is helpful. I would like it recorded that I've suggested that, because I think we may come back later to rely upon it.
And Lindsay, would you like to respond?
Yeah, my interpretation of what Councillor Canavan was saying earlier is that the intention of that element, that H of the motion, was about progressing the work around the van life, the community pact. I'm hoping I've got that correct. If this committee does want to communicate its view that work, it is important that that work progresses, that could be minuted and a note could be sent to Environment and Place if that is what the committee wants to do, and then belt and braces, that could also be raised in the ONS chairs meeting for an update on where that is at. I think there is no harm in a note if that is what the committee wants, but I would just give assurances that I know the work is in progress and it is on the work programme.
Can I see a show of hands of those in favour of this note, of sending in this note around clarification of this piece of work around van life? Those in favour?
It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in favour.
And those against?
That's 2 against.
And any abstentions?
Thank you.
Okay. Let's move on then to the final thing, request from council, which was around the vacant sites for affordable housing. Lindsay, did you want to speak briefly to this one to start us off?
Yeah, certainly. So the request relates to a wider motion, but the specific request to scrutiny was to ask the appropriate scrutiny committee to consider options and obstacles to housing delivery and to decide areas of focus that are realistic and will lead to housing delivery, rather than wasting resource writing 7,500 reports and for each council-owned site, and agree what is needed for effective scrutiny through the scrutiny process. So you'll know that environment and place covers housing, and this is a judgment call in sending this recommendation to you, because we interpreted that the essence of this was around sort of wide scale addressing in terms of housing, and you have the local plan under your remit, and you also have regeneration. So there is a link to environment and place. We're landing it here in the first instance, but we'd like to hear more from the move of the motion so that you can get more clarity on what's being asked, and then make a judgment on whether you agree to the work that's being asked, and indeed invite environment and place to engage with you.
Thank you, Lindsay. Councillor Cooper was the proposer of this motion, but is unable to be here. So Councillor Canavan has said that he would speak to this. So if I can ask you to just give a little further information to the board around the request here, that would be really helpful.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I have spoken to Councillor Cooper today about both these things that we've been discussing. So in relation to this, the reason why I think it's important for it to come here is because it is an essential ingredient of the emerging local plan, and this board has the responsibility for overseeing the work of the local plan. All of this work, or certainly a significant part of this work that this motion seeks, should belong in the development of a local plan. But just speaking entirely personally, Chair, that the development of the new local plan is completely invisible to me. I've spoken to colleagues who've apparently had ward-based meetings. I've had no such meeting, and I've been told that there is some kind of catch-all meeting on the 28th of November, which was the first I've heard of it, and I've had absolutely no input into this process before. So if one compares and contrasts that to the development of the previous local plan, where we had a working group looking at the development of a local plan, where we were able to monitor the progress, look at the things that had been happening, and we were, I think, pretty well informed about the state of the development of the local plan. As it exists at the moment, I've got absolutely no clue as to where we are with it. So when we were talking earlier about the use of rapporteurs, I'm happy, Chair, and Councillor Cooper and I are happy to do it on a joint basis, but it is going to need the input from officers, and that's what concerns me, because I can't even get replies to my emails about the local plan at the moment. So that's my frustration. So I'm happy for us to for Councillor Cooper and I to take this away and do some joint rapporteur work, because this will require a lot of information in the first place before we can even look at it. So that's what we're offering to do. But somebody has got to be able to persuade officers to actually reply to my emails about how the local plan is developing, because I'm just going nowhere.
Okay, thank you. And that does actually touch on something that I raised in the previous item around, if we're going to use this rapporteur process, that we need to make sure that the process is embedded in the culture across council, don't we? Councillor Tarling.
Yeah, just for Councillor Canavan's record, I've just forwarded you email from Rachel Blanchard, who's the Planning Policy Officer, regarding the meeting on Friday the 28th of November. I don't think I can necessarily make that, but I'm sure if you responded to Ms Blanchard, you have, and you've not had a response.
I think that's what he was referring to, the final meeting. So my understanding then is that this, from the motion, the proposal is for this to go onto our work plan for a rapporteur approach initially around the bringing back the vacant sites back into use for housing. And the proposal being at the moment that yourself and Councillor Cooper would be interested in leading on that piece of work. Is that correct? In which case I think we could probably as a board take a view on, do we want to do that and to add that to the work plan on that basis? It will then go through the normal processes of, you know, the need scoping and discussion, you know, in terms of our ongoing bit of work. But from the board's point of view, is that, nope, Lindsay's looking at me like I'm getting that wrong. Sorry.
No, you're not, Chair, but I did just want to highlight that chairs will remember that we had some discussions about how ONF could engage in the developing local plan. And I met with officers and we had scoped a sort of a proposal around all the ONS committees being represented on a steering group relating to the local plan. And I did on your behalf seek an update on that because I was expecting a governance related report that might be coming through at some point. And I was told there wasn't an update at that time, but I will chase it up again on your behalf. So if that is still the intention, there may still be a link from each ONS committee to the developing local plan. But I appreciate Councillor Canavan's current point. And if you do, as a board, want to set up your own rapporteur arrangements now, there's nothing to stop that. I just wanted to let you know that that is something that is on my radar and I will chase for you again.
If I can just say, I may be taking some shortcuts and not speaking clearly enough to this, and I apologise for that. My understanding is that this is a specific issue that falls within the local plan development around the vacant sites, and that Councillor Canavan's suggestion is that he and Councillor Cooper might take that specific issue away and do a piece of in-depth work on it, not the whole local plan. The work that we would do jointly on scrutinising the local plan would continue. Is that okay? Yeah. Councillor Wade.
Am I to understand that this piece of work that Councillors Canavan and Cooper have volunteered to do is about identifying potential vacant sites for high volume housing that I don't know why they would have been overlooked by officers already, but is that the intention? Is that the role?
Not high volume housing, I don't think,
No.
specifically.
Well, it was to identify vacant sites and unused sites, and that's the point I was referring to. In the development of the previous local plan, each individual wards had areas marked out which were identified as potential for building houses. I've got no sight of that in this plan. So I even when I've asked, well, is the new local plan going to be on the same construction as the previous one, i.e. individual ward based reports within it? I can't even get an answer to that. So yes.
Okay, let me come back then. I would be very uncomfortable with any particular political group, not you personally, but any particular having a sort of disproportionate influence over this. I mean, you can imagine the incentive to be, oh look, that looks like a good site. That, you know, one of your opposition councillors that you're not. It's just there are too many incentives at play that I wouldn't be comfortable with. I think that any of that scrutiny work should be done in a politically balanced and completely transparent way.
Well, that hasn't happened before with rapporteur work. If you want me to do it on my own, I'll do it on my own. But that's just, I mean, that's just ridiculous, frankly. If we can't progress work on the basis of us volunteering to do some work for you, then you know, I'm just giving up, frankly.
I think the point is that the rapporteur approach, which we have, you know, talked about this evening as a way forward to make pieces of work happen, does lean on an individual or maybe a couple of people. It can't be politically balanced because there's not enough people involved in that. And I think if you're doing a piece of work as a scrutiny rapporteur, then that's your remit, is to be scrutinising and not to be influencing, or, you know, those are slightly different roles, and we trust people to do it on other topics, so probably have to trust them on all topics that we cover.
Maybe the topics that go to rapporteur need to be the less politically sensitive ones, and I feel like this is quite politically sensitive.
Good.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Councillor Tarling.
Yeah, my memory from the consultation we did first time around the local plan regarding vacant sites, and I didn't look at everybody else's ward. I just looked at my ward, and I expect most councillors concentrated on their ward. When we had the vacant sites come forward, or sites for potential development, we gave commentary on them. Certainly in my ward, I can't think of anything that will have necessarily changed from the local plan. It wasn't the reason for rejection of the local plan was that we didn't get enough vacant sites. There was a lot of work done in advertising and going out asking for people to come forward with vacant sites. I think something came out recently as well for it. I think it's actually a very good idea what Councillor Canavan is proposing, that we have an oversight of that. But I just fear that we're not at that stage of the local plan yet, where you wouldn't want to start from fresh, as we've already done a lot of the groundwork on vacant sites, and certainly in Christchurch they haven't changed that much. But it is definitely worth doing a review and a sense check of that process of vacant sites, and I disagree with Councillor Waite. I don't think it is necessarily political, because you can't magic a piece of land out of nowhere. And I know on my area there was a number of issues with some of the sites that were put forward that wouldn't have passed the planning test anyway, and there were others that were potentially contentious sites for other reasons. And when we were looking to maximise the potential numbers of housing units, because that is what our local plan failed on last time, is the fact that we set a low target, and the planning inspectorate came back and said, well, as I believe it, sorry, you can't set a low target, and that was one of the key reasons for rejection of our local plan. So yeah, we're facing a sort of new government, a new challenge here, and potentially new housing targets, which will be again very onerous to achieve, no matter which political party you're in. And I think it is worth another piece of work. And if Councillor Canavan wishes to take that up in this rapporteur role to review it, I say, well, fair wind to him for doing it. It's not something I'd want to do, but it would be a review of that process. And I don't think you want to go through a whole. I wouldn't imagine you want to go driving around the whole of the BCP looking for empty plots of land. That's not what you're proposing here. You are proposing that we have a review of what we had in the previous local plan and whether we go back there again.
Lindsay.
Yeah, I'm just listening to what people are saying and some of the sort of places you're at, and thinking about a suitable solution. I'm thinking that maybe the board need to better understand where things are at with this anyway, and it would be good to understand where things are at with the local plan, and indeed the things I was referring to. So I'm wondering whether it's worth asking for an update into the board, potentially in one of your briefings, because this is going to be information giving, but you can decide whether you want it as a committee report, both on the local plan and how that is progressing in the governance, but also then to address the issue around the vacant sites specifically. And in terms of then keeping an eye on that and progressing what is within this motion, the board might then be better placed to agree rapporteurs to go forward to monitor that. And in general, I would say that rapporteur work is well suited to monitoring an issue and getting updates and coming back, or progressing a very tightly scoped, small scale issue. not necessarily a large scale scrutiny issue, which this has potential to be. So I think that there's an element of the board needing to understand it, and then the scope, what the work of that rapporteur, pair of rapporteurs will be. And then you can perhaps agree that more formally.
I think that's extremely helpful advice. Councillor Canavan, how would that feel to you if we began this process with a briefing, an information gathering and a clarification?
On the basis of that, I'm withdrawing my offer. I think that's really unhelpful.
Okay. Right. I'm going to propose it then. I propose that we take the suggestion of our scrutiny specialist on how to move forward with this in a constructive way, and we have a briefing on the local plan with a focus on vacant sites for housing in order to gather information needed to do a piece of focused work to address what this motion that council passed was interested in. Can I see a show of, oh, thank you for seconding, Councillor Tiling. Can I see a show of hands, those all in favour of taking that approach? Yes, of course, Councillor Beasley.
Thank you. Could you just give us an idea of timescale? Because
For what?
I've listened very carefully. I have no clue whatsoever about the development of the local plan number 2. And I've heard about a meeting at the end of this month, which I have no awareness of at all. And I doubt, therefore, that any of my group have either, because I haven't heard about it. I've checked against the officer who was mentioned, both in terms of emails in and out. I've had nothing on it whatsoever with her. And so I'm feeling at a disadvantage in terms of voting, because I don't know any of that to
So
start with.
that meeting is something separate. I mean, I am aware of it. It's a mop-up meeting for those who weren't able to attend a meeting in either September or earlier this month in relation to the early stages of the ward-based side of the local plan development, which I haven't attended either of those meetings. I've been unable to. I'll be attending the one at the end of November. I don't know who has and hasn't been sent that invitation. I've had it, but clearly some haven't. But what this is about is us as a board having a better grasp of where we're at with the local plan, which falls slightly separate to that meeting, which is for ward councillors. And I think what we're talking about is starting that process with a briefing. Now, I don't know when our next available briefing slot is. That might be a useful bit of information, but I don't off the top of my head know. I'm just wondering if there's any chance of finding that out.
Chair, to come back, if I may, our next board meeting is on Monday, the 8th of December.
But not our next briefing session.
No, but could we not get a briefing added to that agenda?
That agenda is very full already with CGR amongst other things.
Well, it'll only take 5 minutes to give us a briefing in terms of an update, and I'd just like to know. Otherwise, could I ask Democratic Services to get an officer to contact me so that I can inform members of my group, because I am unaware of any developments whatsoever. I'm trying to be as patient as I can, Chair, but really this is testing it.
Goodness me. Councillor Trent.
Yeah, we actually had individual meetings ward by ward, and that's basically what we've had. And everyone would have been invited to one of 2 dates. And as the chair has explained, the 28th is the mop-up for those who weren't able to make one of those. The rest of the process it's obviously early days in that process, but perhaps we can just ask at the first suitable opportunity, whether it's the 8th of December or whether it's a January meeting or whatever, that we have an updated briefing, because as it's now part of what we look at in this overview and scrutiny board, then it will be useful to at least know what's going on. But I don't think anyone's missed anything. It was a ward by ward individual invitation, and certainly, yeah, and so and it broke down into various wards, and certainly my ward was kind of represented with a couple of members. So, but the briefing on the whole process would be useful. But if December is too crowded, and I suspect it will be quite a crowded meeting,
Yes.
then the next available opportunity after that, and if we're meeting every month, then you know, let's kind of put it in as soon as possible.
We have agreed briefing sessions throughout the year, specifically to take account of things like this, where we might be taking just a more of an information receiving approach. So I'm suggesting we use the next available one of those.
So when is that?
Well, and I was asking Democratic Services to give us the date.
It's the 9th of March.
Oh, that's quite a long way away, isn't it?
We could look at it.
Okay, it is on the 9th of March, which is quite a long way away. So we will look at trying to get that onto an agenda more quickly than that. Councillor Canavan.
Well, I mean, I just have to respond to Councillor Trent's point. That's absolutely not true. There has been no invitation for the development of the new local plan in Boscombe.
Okay.
And the only reason I knew about the 28th of November was because I wrote to complain to the planning officer that I hadn't had a ward-based adjournment. And that's when they told me the meeting was on the 28th of November and why I was then copied into the subsequent email. Because if I hadn't have done that, I wouldn't have known, like Councillor Beattie hasn't known. So it's frankly just been, well, obscure would be putting it politely.
Okay, I think, and I appreciate the frustration that's being expressed, but I also think this is outside the remit of the board to deal with, because this is around the development of the local plan, which is not, yeah. Right. So let's agree then, I think, the proposal, which I'll slightly amend, is that we put this forward as soon as possible. We'll have a briefing for the board on the local plan, which we'll ask officers to give us an update on where it's got to, and perhaps they'll be able to address some of these frustrations that the board are expressing tonight, and a specific focus on the vacant sites and the issues that were raised in that motion that came through from council asking overview and scrutiny to have a look at. So we will ask for a briefing on that, out of which we will then be able to ascertain a correct, you know, the best course of action for taking our work, our scrutiny work on that aspect forward. Does that sound okay? Yes, thank you. Okay, is it all right if we go to a vote? All those in favour of that approach?
1, 2, 3, 4. That's unanimous.
Oh, good. That's unanimous. All right. I think that's covered the recommendations item, hasn't it? And we can move on to the final. I think it's our final items. This is the work plan.
Yeah.
Yes. I have. No, I have. You have all the report of the work plan as usual. There were no further updates to the work plan beyond that what's in your agenda. Does anybody have any comments, any questions, any points they wanted to raise around the work plan? Councillor Trent.
Yeah, I'm looking at the work plan. Obviously, the next meeting, 8th of December, is fairly full. The 5th of January meeting, always a nuisance being on the first Monday of the month, but never mind. There's parking enforcement around schools and the crime and disorder scrutiny thing, which is a routine annual thing, which is quite useful, but it's not a major thing that bogs us down. That might be a good opportunity to get updated on the local plan. It does seem to be a lighter than average meeting. It hasn't got anything really contentious on it.
No, but it has got 3 items, and I do try and keep the agenda to 3 items.
Well, I've only got
And
2.
potentially the working group.
I've only got 2.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Potentially.
You got it in different colours, yeah.
Yeah, and also we as we've talked about, the consultation working group may be feeding back there as well. We are quite packed. But have taken on board the need to add this local plan update in to our work, and we'll make sure it happens as quickly as is humanly possible. If you trust me to go away and make that happen. Has anybody else got anything they wanted to say around the work plan? Okay, in that case, I think that we can close the meeting. Thank you all for your time. Good night.